Welcome, guys, to another video. This is Zygrene Car Talk number 32, and we have two very, very special guests. First of all, we have Kevin. He's been on the podcast before, as you guys might remember. We had a little fireside chat at his place in Vegas a couple months back. And we also have Chris, aka TheTopher from YouTube. As you can see, he's got his Winding Road t-shirt there. And we're here today because we've got something in common outside of the fact that we all perfectly showed up with our model cars in the background. That proves just how much of car nerds we actually are. But also we all own either a Toyota Gr86 in Kevin's case or a Subaru BRZ, the 2022 model in Chris's case, and obviously yours truly. So we've all owned our cars for varying lengths of time. Myself and Chris, we've tracked our cars already. And then Kevin, he's still in the break-in period, but he has a 2013 Scion FRS that he's tracked for 9 years, or at least owned for 9 years. So we've got a lot of interesting topics or discussions around that topic today. But before we get into it, let's just do a brief round of intros. So Kevin, you've been on the channel before. People probably know about you at this point, but yeah, tell us a few things about yourself.
Sure. Hey guys, so I'm Kevin Jubbal, and I do YouTube in the medical education space primarily. So Med School Insiders and Kevin Jubbal MD are my two more established channels, but I just recently started Jubbal in Cars. So it's similar to Zygrene. It's like a car review, car driving dynamic channel. And yeah, I guess we all got brought together by this, this obsession of cars and our shared passion of putting that passion on YouTube.
Awesome. And Chris, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Kevin, it's great to have you as a POV disciple. You're doing all POV stuff too, which is awesome. I started the Winding Road channel back in 2011 or kind of restarted it. And we did a bunch of no talking videos for years. And then in around 2017, I started taking the TheTopher channel a little bit more seriously. So I'm mostly full-time with that these days. I just bought a 2022 BRZ. I had a 2014 for 6 years and 60,000 miles. So a little bit of experience with the previous generation too. And yeah, I just like slow, underpowered rear-wheel drive cars.
I think we're all very similar in that regard. Yeah.
And lightweight too. Don't forget the lightweight.
That's important. Yeah.
Yes. All right. So with that out of the way, let's talk about something very general first around this new platform. We'll get into some of the nitty-gritty RTV issues and things like that a little bit later. But so let's share, first of all, I'll go first. So I've owned my BRZ for just over 8 months now, and I've clocked over 9,000 miles on it, mostly through commuting and daily driving. But I've also done 6 track days all around the Bay Area, or NorCal tracks, Sonoma Raceway, Thunder Hill, and so forth. And I've had such a great experience with the car already. I had one nagging issue, which was the radiator busted. And I think this is a somewhat common problem. But outside of that, the car has been so good to me. Obviously myself, I come from the world of Hondas like S2000s and obviously the NSX. And I find myself not really missing the S2000 as much as I thought I would after I got the BRZ. And I know both of you have spent a decent amount of time behind the wheel of S2000s. So maybe we talk about that first. What has been your ownership experience with your car so far? How do you like it as a daily, a commuter? And then at least Chris, in your case, how do you like it as a track car? But let's start with you, Kevin.
So I just got my Gr86 July 4th weekend, so just about a month ago. And I was on wait list since last November. It had been over 7 months. It was such a painful wait, but I was very particular with wanting a specific trim, specific color. Eventually I caved. I got a base level Neptune Blue manual Gr86, even though I wanted the premium. And I've had my 2013 Scion FRS since July of 2013. So it's been 9 years with that car. And then now I just got the Gr86, and I actually own both currently. I'm going to be getting rid of the FRS, but both are in my garage right now. So I've been driving them back to back and comparing them. The two are actually substantially different. I thought they would be more similar than they actually are. the Gr86 is overall just such a better a daily, but the first gen is more raw and the steering is so much better. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about the steering, because the steering on the new gen is a huge disappointment, especially with the center feel. Like when you're like center and a little bit off, which is most of our driving because we're mostly on straight-ish roads, wasn't that good. But I mean, I'm only 900 miles in. I haven't reached the 1,000 mile break-in, so I haven't pushed it as much. I have driven your BRZ. I have driven another Toyota Gr86 that were broken in. So, you know, I'm looking forward to the power bump, especially at the higher, you know, when you're really getting on it. I know that that's a huge difference, but the steering, I'm still really frustrated with that, man. The steering just, I care so much about steering, and it's a big downgrade that no one's really talking about.
You've been sending me a lot of texts being like, what the hell, man? Why is no one talking about this except like Savage Geese, which I do give that channel a lot of props. They do a great job. But point noted, you only have 900 miles on it. So I'm curious to see, like, once you break it in and you start driving it harder, like especially taking it to track days, if your opinion on anything, especially the steering, will change. I don't think it will, but
well, I think on the track, because I drove that Toyota Gr86 on some windy roads and some mountains here in Vegas, and because it was constantly turning, the steering was fine. It's actually more when you're close to center or a little bit right off of it. That's where I have this issue where it's like a lighter weighting. It feels very dead. And then once you turn, then it loads up. Then you actually get more feedback and it feels better. Not quite as good as the first gen, but better. So I think on the track, it'll be all right. But I mean, the car, don't get me wrong, it's a great car. Like, that's just the one thing I don't like. It's so much more comfortable, so much more daily friendly. And initially I was thinking I needed to get like an IS 500 as a practical daily. And this would be, you know, just like my track toy, and I would make it super raw and whatever. But now I'm like, dude, this car's hella comfortable. This car is great.
For sure. So one more comment on the steering before we go over to Chris. I agree. The steering on center, or just off center, I guess you could call it, is not great. And even when it's loaded up, it doesn't give you a ton of feedback. But on track, and maybe Chris, you can comment on this too. I don't know if you've experienced this, but if you load up the front tires pretty heavily during like a sustained G corner for more than a few seconds, there comes a point where the steering feel all of a sudden becomes very muddy. Like it almost like just like feels like it's something is like locking out or like rubbing, so that like when you move the wheel, you don't get a ton of like the front tires don't really respond until you just kind of get out of that corner. Very weird feeling. And I've had other owners say the exact same thing. So it's not a strong suit of the car, despite I think what a lot of initial reviews are saying, like, oh, it's got gorgeous steering. No, that's just simply not true compared to the majority of cars in its class.
Dude, I saw this one car reviewer comparing it to a Porsche EPS, and I was like, I can't see it.
No,
I can't see it at all.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not on the same level of Porsche. But Chris, how about you? What's been your ownership experience with the car so far? Like, how many miles have you clocked on it? And then what do you think about the steering?
Yeah, I haven't driven it nearly as much as I thought I would. I've been really busy driving press cars, but I have about 3,600 miles on it. 1.5 track days. I did a quick test kind of shakedown session at M1 Concours here in Detroit for just a few laps, just kind of get some baseline bearings, terminal understeer everywhere. Then I did the alignment, and then I did a track day at Gingerman. It felt fantastic. So I've got a decent amount of track time, some drifting around, a little bit of winter driving too. We had one good snow on winter tires when I first got the car. I bought the car in February. So we had, or maybe it was March. I don't know. I can't remember. It was March 2022. And got one good snow in it. Super fun, kind of sketchy on 2-year-old Blizzaks. But I'm really excited for this winter to drive. That's kind of when I enjoy driving my BRZs the most, is in the snow. And I'm going to go with a 16-inch wheel and tire setup, slightly oversized winter tires, get a little bit more ground clearance. And I can't wait to test that out, because that's something I never really did on my old car, was go with the oversized tire. And it just needs just a little bit more ground clearance to get through Michigan winters. So I'm really excited about that.
Can we take a brief moment just to appreciate the Topher's on driving skill with that car? Like, you had some stories of you drifting. I was like, how are you so buttery smooth? And I actually messaged you. I was like, hey, like, how did you learn to catch your oversteer just like so seamlessly. Because when I do it, there's a little bit of like a jerk back and forth. It was just beautiful, man. It was
watching
really
Chris
an
Harris
inspiration.
videos and practice on winter tires, burning up old winter tires on a wet track. That was like, I have a video with my 2014 BRZ. It's titled like 130 miles of sideways. And it took me all day to burn off a section like of like 195 winter Blizzaks, I think my track set up on the front and then the Blizzaks on the rear. So it was not an equal tire setup at all, but you could just go sideways on demand all day.
So there was one where you were on a dry track there. Were those not the Primacies?
My new BRZ, that was a dry track, and those are just stock Primacies, yeah.
Primacies. Okay. I'm actually curious to see how the Primacies are on track, because
I've
never tried Primacies on even autocross or track. So I know that they're super slidey.
Yeah.
These new tires have more grip. I don't know if they changed the compound.
Oh, really?
They're louder and they're okay. I don't know. I think I'm once I wear them out, if I can wear them out. I didn't wear them out on my old BRZ. Of course, I had 4 sets of wheels and tires. So
wait, Chris, are you on the Primus? Like, is yours a premium or a limited?
It's a premium. So it's the base model on 17-inch Primacies. And they're fine tires. That was my favorite tire setup on the old 2014 BRZ. It was just the perfect amount of slip. You could get the tail out on the street. There's more grip to these new tires. It's got to be a compound adjustment. And of course, they've added more grip to the rear end with suspension travel, the wider track and stuff. But I would actually like to daily the car on a slightly slipperier set of tires.
I agree.
That's just my
having
preference.
a lower grip tire for the street is just so much more fun, because you can actually kind of like play with the limit without, just going excessively fast.
I will say
full
that
grip.
The suspension between BRZ and FRS or Gr86 is also a little bit different, because even with my 2013 Scion FRS, which has very harsh suspension, very tail happy, I have 245 PS4Ss, and I'm able to slip and slide that going to get groceries, because it's just the way that I guess the suspension is tuned OEM. I know the BRZ is not as much. I mean, have you guys driven both back to back to talk about the suspension differences between Gr86 and BRZ?
Yeah, so I have not necessarily back to back, but on different days, a bone stock Gr86 versus bone stock BRZ, and the difference is really apparent, actually. Even just driving straight, like at 60 miles an hour on a road that has a few undulations and some potholes and things like that, the BRZ, the rear end of the car seems to soak up those bumps a lot better. And I was thinking at first, yes, I know that the two cars have different spring rates and damper settings, but I figured like the difference would be really, really small and only noticeable on a track. But I was literally going 60 miles an hour on a straight road, and I felt the difference immediately. Like the Gr86 has a little bit more harshness and bounce in the rear suspension. I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, Chris.
Yeah, same thing. The Gr86 is stiff, and especially in the cold, it stiffens up a lot. I know Mark from Savage Geese was complaining that in winter temperatures below 30 degrees Fahrenheit, it's almost too stiff. Whereas the BRZ, at least out here in the Salt Belt, Michigan roads, super pothole, really bumpy. The suspension's so soft. I had a Civic Si this week that I put a bunch of miles on. And the Civic Si it's pretty typical for like a front wheel drive performance car in terms of suspension stiffness. It's about like what a GTI or Focus ST or Fiesta ST is like, but the BRZ just rides like a Camry compared to it. It's so soft.
Wow.
And it really puts its power down. And I'm surprised at how soft the suspension is, but how balanced it also is on track with a good alignment. I couldn't believe how well it did on track. I think I'm just going to keep the stock suspension. I was thinking about doing a set of like gravel rally coilovers for the car and putting a little bit of a lift on it, having some fun off road with it. But I think I'm just going to stick with the stock suspension for now. Maybe just oversized tires, and I don't want to really mess with alignment and all that stuff. So we'll leave it stock for now and see what happens.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And I have a similar sentiment about the stock BRZ suspension, because, you know, my driving style, and I think I probably speak for all three of us, like we like a little bit of oversteer, power oversteer. That's why we have FR layout cars after all. But so before I got my BRZ, you know, I knew the Gr86 would be the more tail happy car based on the suspension setup. So I was a little bit not unhappy, but a little bit disappointed that I wasn't able to secure a Gr86. Ultimately, I got the BRZ not because I preferred Subaru, but just because it was the first car that was available to me at MSRP without a wait.
Same here.
Right. So, but then when I started driving,
I'm too superficial. I was like, I can't with the face. I gotta
Yeah.
get the Gr86. I like the face.
The Toyota front end does look a lot better. I'll give you that. But after I drove both cars, I was like, you know what? I'm actually really happy with the fact that I have the BRZ, because from a daily driver perspective, the ride quality is just far superior in my opinion. And on track, all it takes is a couple of little tweaks like tire pressure settings, and then Chris, like you added the camber bolts to yours, I did the same thing to mine. And it's not like, it does have some understeer, but it's so easy to neutralize with either steering input or the throttle that it's really not, it's not like it's a boring car to drive compared to the Gr86 in my opinion. Like I guess what I'm saying is I'd rather give a little bit of that, or I'll accept a little bit of understeer in exchange for much better ride quality as a daily.
That makes sense. I'm actually curious because both me and Chris got the lower level. We didn't get the, I mean, for BRZ, the terminology switched, but we got the lower level trim. And I'm wondering if you guys had a strong preference between the two, or if you are happy with your decision. So Chris, I actually watched your BRZ limited versus premium comparison video like a few times. And I was like, should I go with the base? Should I go with the premium? And you seem pretty happy, but I'd like to hear if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think ultimately I would have preferred to get a premium just because, and I actually would have preferred to get a premium Gr86. I like the interior a little bit better. I'm not a huge fan of the red stitching, but ultimately I don't really care about options and stuff like that. Even the sound system isn't a big deal for me. This is just kind of a fun daily and a weekend track toy a couple times a year. I really don't have time to do too many track days. So ultimately I just want a BRZ, and whether it's the simpler, less expensive package or the more, because the price difference is really negligible between the two.
It's like $2,700.
Yeah, it's really little. I mean, ultimately, I would say get whatever you can get your hands on. If you can get a premium and that makes a difference to you, go for it. But if all you can get is a base, depending on whichever manufacturer, then go for it, because I don't think you're going to enjoy the car any less.
Yeah, well said. Well said.
Completely agree. Before we move on to the next topic, the one thing that I still wanted you to address, Chris, is what do you think about the steering feel of the BRZ, especially on track?
Yeah, so I actually had an opportunity on track to drive the previous gen 86 and the new Gr86 back to back. And in my video, I don't know if you guys have seen it. This is like one of my many track videos from the launch event.
I watched them all. I'm obsessed with.
You watched them all.
With the TOPher.
I haven't seen that one, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I did say the steering was better on the old car. It felt more visceral, it was a bit weightier, better feel. And I didn't really like the steering on the new Gr86 BRZ as much when I first bought my car. I was kind of worried that it was a little bit too light, too over assisted. I never really thought the steering feel was that amazing on the initial cars, on the original BRZ and GT86/FRS. It was okay. It was good steering, but it wasn't as mind-blowing as what everyone was making it out to be. But I've really started to like the steering on the new BRZ. I think it's a little bit of it kind of bridges the gap between previous gen car and the Miata. And I think it makes the car feel a little bit lighter and more nimble and more agile and more chuckable, whereas the old car was a little bit heavier and it felt like it was weightier than it was. It didn't feel like a 2,700 pound car. It felt more like a 3,000 pound car. I liked the steering feel for the old cars. It was nice, but I've really grown to like the lighter steering, even though you're sacrificing some feedback. I even did a road trip in the car recently. I thought it was going to be a little bit too much wandering on the highway. It was perfect. So I think it all ultimately comes down to personal preference, but yeah, I've been okay with it.
So
I've grown to
what
like it a
did you
lot more
not
than
like
I
about
thought
the
I would.
first? What was not as good about the first generation steering? I mean, obviously as an EPS, because we're not comparing this to like hydraulic
Mhm.
steering, but as an EPS, what did you feel was lacking in the first gen?
I wanted the steering to have Miata lightness, but with BRZ feel, and now we're kind of in the middle of that. So I didn't really like how heavy it made the car feel. It felt really planted, but I felt like I wanted the car to feel a little bit more chuckable and willing to kind of turn in and rotate. It had great uh, auto steer characteristics when sliding around. Like you could basically just drift the car with one finger. You barely had to pay attention. You barely had to do any inputs. Just throttle input, let the steering do its thing, auto drift. So easy, so fun. Um, but yeah, the old cars definitely had a more visceral feel, and that translated to NVH, to engine sound, to a lot of different things. The new cars are much more refined. And you started to see some of that refinement after the 2017 refresh, but nowhere near the level that we have with the 22 model year. So
Do you
those are
do
my
you
thoughts on this.
experience on your day-to-day driving any issues with that center and slightly off center feel? Because even on the highway, I mean, they both have pretty fast steering racks, and the first gen, you move it just like a millimeter this way or that way, and that's going to change on the highway whether you're staying in your lane or not.
Sure.
And with the new gen, because of this really weird behavior at center, I find it like I need to concentrate to stay centered in my lane. I'm like, this is ridiculous. What's going on? Why can't I just drive this car normally? Because that center feel is just it's just off for me.
May have changed a little bit with alignment too.
Yeah.
I'm pretty happy with my car right now. I've gotten used to it, and I think the alignment helped some. So I'm at about
Okay.
1.5, 1.6 degrees negative camber on the front roto. So
Yeah,
I
same,
did
same,
the
same here. I think it does have to do partially with camber. Obviously, so like the BRZ, I don't know about the GR86, I assume it's the same, but from the factory, it comes with, not only does it come with basically no negative camber, like less than 1 degree of negative camber on each side, but also the variance between the two sides, left and right, is actually bigger than you would expect from the factory. Like I've seen some cars or some owners say that like one side was like point negative two, and then the other side would be like point negative not like 0.9. So that's like actually a really huge delta if you think about it, like percentage wise. Like one side has like 3 or 4 times more negative camber than the other. So I went through this very, very easy job of doing the what is it? The upper crash bolts, basically a thinner bolt on the control arm that allows you to push the control arms in a little bit. So that got me up to, I didn't measure the camber before, but it got me up to negative 0.9 on both sides. And then I did the SPC lower camber bolts. They're eccentric bolts. And then that got me actually to shockingly minus 2.6 on both
Yeah,
sides.
that's gonna make a big difference.
And that can dramatically change the on-track behavior. And I think it also partially solved that wandering behavior on the highway that you're talking about.
Okay, I'm gonna first track the car totally stock everything other than brake pads and fluids. But after that first track day, then I'll definitely do these camper bolts.
Yeah, I would say that's definitely the right approach. Okay, moving on to a different topic, probably the most highly talked about topic right now in the Gr86 BRZ world, the warranty problem with the engine. So I haven't looked super deep into this, but I understand at a fairly high level what happened. So it was one particular incident that shed a lot of light on this and actually got Toyota to actually start looking at it and issue a response. This guy named Blake, he has a 2022 GR86 that he just clocked 14,000 miles on, or rather, it hit 14,000 miles back in July when he had an engine failure. So the background is Toyota actually gives you a free track day as well as a 1-year NASA membership. It's like basically an HPDE organization when you purchase a GR86. Subaru does not do that, by the way. So it's part of the whole, Gazoo Racing brand. They want you to track your car. Toyota's CEO is famously like a huge car guy. He's done a lot of racing in his years. So it all is part of the marketing campaign for the car, right? And so Blake tracked his car. He autocrossed it, I believe. And he did, he had some videos and pictures on his social media. And then one day his engine just popped. And then I believe what happened is he took it to the dealership, and they found, I don't know. So this part I'm not super clear on. I don't know if he pulled the oil pan apart or if the Toyota dealer did, but either way.
My understanding is that the Toyota dealership did not do anything, and they went first to social media, found a photo of him getting sideways at an autocross event, and then said, your warranty is void. And it was the big deal that a lot of people were saying is that, hey, they didn't even look at the car to see what the issue was. They just voided it based on a photo on social media.
So that was my understanding also based on the way it was worded, the various articles that I saw. It seemed like Blake, like he actually went in and like pulled the oil pan and looked at it himself and took a picture of an excessive amount of RTV gasket at the oil pickup tube. So essentially what happened is, this has been a Subaru engine issue for a long time, even with the first gen. But they apply too much RTV sealant within the engine from the factory. And so at high temperatures, especially on racetrack conditions, a lot of that excess will come off and actually end up in your oil pan. And then if enough of it gets clogged up in the little filter in your oil pickup tube, obviously you'll have oil starvation. And so he suffered like a cylinder 3 or cylinder 4 problem. And then essentially he needed a brand new engine, or at least a rebuilt engine. And Toyota literally like went into his social media, as you said, Kevin, found pictures of him like drifting it at autocross and denied his warranty claim based on that.
One thing to also keep in mind though is like that was some service person or some warranty person at a specific Toyota dealership.
True.
Versus like Toyota corporate. So
true. It is very
two separate entities.
Yeah, important distinction to make, because it's at the this applies to all manufacturers. Like dealerships treat cars and warranties and things differently. So it's very much your mileage may vary. But what ended up happening, this blew up all over social media, and basically like Toyota got a lot of bad PR. And then less than a week later, like this is just a couple of days ago, PR responded, or Toyota responded and said that they would cover Blake's warranty engine replacement.
Yeah, Toyota corporate.
Toyota corporate, yes. But now the lingering question remains on how are they going to treat the overall warranty of the Gr86 platform? Because I found an article, apparently in the UK, the GR Yaris, Toyota corporate specifically says that they will not void your warranty if you track the car. And they take it as a case-by-case basis, but essentially, if there's a failure that results specifically from a track day, they'll take a look at it. If they determine that the failure was a manufacturing problem or something, then they'll actually still cover it. So I'm curious to see if corporate actually applies that to the GR86 platform as well.
Because right now it's very vague language. They're just saying like, case by case basis. And in this instance with Blake, they're gonna help him out, take care of him. But when I read what they actually stated officially, it still seemed very vague.
Yeah.
Intentionally vague, so that I would still not feel comfortable if something happened at the racetrack with my car.
Agreed. It is a case by case basis the way they wrote it, and I think Chris, I want to hear your thoughts on this in a second too. But one thing that I'm just trying to think through, like how this would potentially make sense for both the customer and for Toyota, because obviously, like if you go out and take your Gr86 to the track and you money shift it, you're trying to shift from 4th to 5th, and you end up in 3rd and like rev it to 8,500 RPM. That's your fault, man. Like you shouldn't expect corporate to bail you out in that situation for a new engine. But how do you actually track something like that? Now that people know that dealers will potentially go and actually look at your social media, they'll probably be a lot more careful about posting that kind of stuff. So how do you actually know? So this brings me back a couple of years. to my Porsche ownership experience with my 987 and 997 Cayman and 911 respectively. In the Porsche world, there's something called a durametric. It's like basically a thing that you can plug into your OBD2, and it'll give you a report on your computer that shows the ranges of RPMs for each over rev that happened during the engine's lifespan. This dates back all the way to the early 2000s. So a lot of used Porsches, when they get offered for sale, a lot of the discerning buyers will actually ask for that report and see like, oh, there was a range 5 over rev. That means, this particular model was revved to 9,500 to 10,000 RPM, even though the red line's only, 7,200 or something like that. So I wonder if that kind of ability is available for the FA24 engine, and if that's something that the dealers could use as sort of like to take these claims on a case-by-case basis.
One other thing that some people on the forums were raising, so yeah, like whether or not the ECU actually logs the over revs and what's happening is one question. The other question is there's this Toyota Connect app, or Subaru has something similar. And when you create an account and you're connected to the cloud, it shows you your car location, et cetera. And you have to agree to a lot of these terms and conditions that do provide all that data to Toyota where you happen to be. So some people are saying don't use that, because if your location is at the track and that's when something happens, they're just going to void your warranty automatically, just assuming that you were, beating on the car.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Plus, I don't want Toyota to know where I'm driving my car. That seems like a little bit of an invasion of privacy there. But Chris, what do you think about this? Does this worry you? Are you planning to do anything about it? Are you going to drop your oil pan like some people have been doing, or are you just going to let things play out?
I'm not planning on modifying the engine. I don't think this car needs it like the old car may have. So I'm feeling pretty safe as far as maintaining my warranty. I'm just going to keep enjoying the car. These are issues that always pop up in first model years. We had some similar things with the 2013 FRSs. Some of them were great. Some of them had problems. Kevin's car
mine's been bulletproof
just fine
for 9 years.
Yeah, my 2014 was bulletproof. It's something that you have to kind of take on a case-by-case basis. We don't know how widespread of an issue this is. Some people have been great. Some people have had an excess amount of sealant in their oil pans after checking. I think if you have a problem, you can always take it up with corporate, and that's probably the best way to go if your dealer gives you any issues. And dealerships, the customer service it's a big range. Some dealerships don't care about modifications. Some will raise a stink and void your warranty if you have an exhaust. You kind of have to know which dealerships to go to and where to service your car, and which are the cool ones, who will work with you. So it's kind of tough to say. I don't think it's as big of an issue as all this stuff always gets blown out of proportion on forums. You read about problems, and it's sometimes the squeakiest wheel gets the most grease. So or I don't know if that's a saying or something like that. Something with squeaky wheels and loud and lots of internet attention and articles. I posted an article or just an update from Motor Trend, and the drive reported that a Toyota representative said that others should be able to use their Gr86s at future autocross and track day events without putting the warranty in jeopardy. And I would assume Subaru would take the same stance. So, these are performance vehicles that are marketed with just pretty much just drifting videos.
Yeah,
and
true.
It is right now we're in this infancy. Maybe there'll be a service bulletin, maybe there will be a recall. Engine failures are a serious thing that manufacturers take seriously. Enough of them have to happen for it to be a widespread issue. And then of course NHTSA gets involved, stuff like that. So we'll just kind of see how it plays out. Right now, I'm just going to keep enjoying my car. I took it out for a drive this morning, revved the pants off of it, had some fun. And I would recommend other people just keep driving your car. Don't let it ruin the ownership experience for you. I heard some rumors that back in like 2009, 2010, Subaru engines had some issues with oil leaks, and the solution was to add more RTV sealant. And here we are now. So You
Yeah, I came
know?
across the same.
Yep.
I agree with Chris's take on, look, I mean, with the way the internet and social media works, like, of course, it's going to get blown out of proportion. When you look at the actual incidence rate, I mean, Blake wasn't the only guy. There was a couple people that we
Yeah.
know of that have posted publicly on forums and whatnot, and maybe there's some people who didn't. So let's say it's like 3, 4, 5 people out of how many thousands of cars. So the incidence rate is very, very low. It's unlikely to happen to any person, but if it happens to you, it's a huge deal, right? It really sucks. So my approach with my car, at least, is, I think some people are like, hey, screw the braking procedure. I'm just like, it's broken in a factory. I'm like, I don't know, man. I'm just gonna follow the manual. Like, I'm gonna keep it below 4,000 until I hit 1,000 miles. And when I start tracking it, I want to be mindful that, here in Las Vegas, it gets pretty hot. So I'll probably get a separate oil cooler just to increase reliability on the track. And I remember when I was looking at track prep for my first gen, a lot of people talked about the baffled oil pan, right?
Yeah.
To prevent starvation. And I wonder, thinking back, was it just the issue of like sustained G forces around a corner causing oil starvation, or were those issues also due to RTV back then? And then people just thought it was the G forces. So if we determine that, hey, doing X, Y, or Z small things are going to really improve the reliability of your engine, especially when you're pushing it on track, then I'll probably do those things. But like Chris was saying, in the meantime, yeah, I'm going to enjoy my car, man. Once I hit 1,000 RPM, like, all bets are off.
Yeah, I
I
like
do
that
run a little
approach.
bit of liquid moly MOS2 in my
Mm.
engine, and that gives me a little bit of a safety net with on track driving where there potentially could be oil starvation. Also, I don't run super sticky tires on track, and the stickier the tire, the more chances of oil starvation you're going to run into. On the primacies, when you're just sliding around, it's probably going to be okay.
That's such a great point. I have a similar approach nowadays. Like the fastest guys on track, there's no way I'm going to compete with them. Like their driving skills are just on another level. And so trying to chase after their lap times, I used to do that in my S2000. But I realized like I don't even really enjoy doing that much. Like I'd rather just have fun at track days. Ultimately, they're, you know, high performance driving events. It's not a sanctioned race. It's not a time. I mean, there are
But
time
part of
trial
the
events.
fun is improving your driving technique.
It
I guess it's
is.
less about the time. There's some correlation there, but it's about like, hey, if I'm a better driver today than I was at the last track event, that to me is like, that's the rush. That's so much
Yes.
fun.
Like so like timing yourself is I think important, but not necessarily comparing and trying to chase after other people's lap times.
For sure.
So with that approach, I've also that's why I started tracking my BRZ with the stock. So I had the Pilot Sport 4s. And then I switched over to an even worse tire. I switched to the Champero SX2, which is honestly a garbage tire for track days. But it was like the approved tire for my local California 8-6 Drive Cup, like time attack event or series. And I had a lot of fun with those tires. Then most recently, I was like, I'm going to try some stickier tires, but I'm still not going to go to that point of like ultra hardcore, like to the point where like any little slip angle, like you're just going to have a lot less freedom to play with the car. So my tire right now is a Kumho V730, just like stock size, like 225s. And, it still gives me plenty of freedom to kind of play with the balance of the car. So I don't want to go stickier than that. So I think that is one of the things you can do to give yourself a little bit of a safety net. To Yale's point, don't run a super sticky tire because that's when oil starvation starts to happen. Not only that, like other things, suspension components and so forth, everything just takes on so much stress that unless you're like top like 1 or 2% of drivers out there at an HPDE, and you're also doing a timed event or like a race, I don't like, to me it's just not worth it to go like all out. And to your point, Kevin, around the oil cooler, like I've done that on my car as well. And running a thicker oil helps as well. So like the stock oil, I actually know a few people who ran the OEM oil that came with the car, the 0W20, and they tracked on it a couple of times. and then they did a Blackstone oil analysis, and the results were not good.
Oh,
Yeah, so upgrading to like a 5W30, I think
that's what I
is
do in
kind of
my
what
FRS as well. I've been doing
Yeah.
5W30 for years.
Yeah, so I just ran 2 track days on, was it Pennzoil Platinum 5W30, and I'm waiting for my oil analysis to come back. So I'll probably share an update on that later. But yeah, there's just a little things you can do here and there to help yourself, keep your car a little bit safer.
Going back to the track day.
Oh, did we lose Kevin?
Oh, I got to make my car as fast as possible. And then when your car is fast and you raise the limits of your car, it is harder for you to approach those limits in a safe way. And to improve as a driver, you need to approach your limit and the car's limit. So when you have a car like the BRZ FRS and it's mostly stock, not super sticky tires, when the limit's down here, you can improve at a much faster rate. So
Yeah.
I think that's really good advice to not be afraid of keeping your car slow, because you will become a better driver. And at the end of the day, it's all about being the best driver you can be, not bragging about some lap time that no one really cares about.
Here's
Completely
my
agree.
take on this. If you want a really fast car, you should start with a really fast car. You should begin with a Corvette or a Camaro SS1LE or a ZL1. If you want to be like really chasing lap times and be the fastest person out on track, a vehicle outside of its intended range, you're going to just run into a bunch of problems. Some people love that. They're masochists. They want to keep tuning and modifying and changing and blowing engines. That's not me. And that's probably not most enthusiasts. I think the new Gr86 BRZ has enough power to keep people happy. One of the only issues that I have with it on track is there is some type of heat protection system in place with the ECU. I don't know if it's to save the cats or what it
Mhm.
is, but it was heat soaking after about 2 hot laps.
Yeah.
So, and at that point, I was at what felt like previous gen power levels. I had a kind of a lap battle briefly with a 987 Cayman. Most fun I've ever had on track in a BRC. It was awesome. I was on the stock primacies, sliding everywhere, just 11 tenths around every corner. My tires were overinflated to like 39 PSI because it was my first session out. 5th lap in, power started to drop significantly, and then I hit massive brake fade. So I was like, okay, I know what I need to do now for the next track day. I need better brakes. The power, I can deal with that. That's okay. But something to note is that on track, you're going to get some heat soak or whatever it ultimately is, ECU pulling timing.
I had the
So
same exact problem. Yeah. Especially, at warmer track days, like 80 degrees Fahrenheit and above.
Yep.
There are some bare minimum things you need to do to make your BRZ or Gr86 track capable, even if you're a beginner driver and you're not pushing the car that hard. So, brake pads, .4 brake fluid, and then, as I was saying before, I would recommend just swapping out the stock 0W20 oil to a 5W30, and then yeah, if you don't want it to pull power, just go ahead and get an oil cooler. Like, there's a couple of solutions out there. There's a color fittings one. There's the Jackson Racing one that came out recently, and I think it's just like well worth the price to give you that peace of mind and to have your car performing consistently lap after lap.
So when you install one of those air oil coolers, do you have to remove the OEM one, or do they both work together at the same time? Because there's the oil water one that comes OEM and then second generation.
Yeah, for the color fittings one, you do need to remove the stock one. Leaving the stock one in there is not going to do anything for you. And I think for the Jackson Racing one, I just saw a picture of this like last night. If you tried to leave your OEM one in there, somehow like the way with how the Jackson Racing one mounts, you won't be able to close your hood.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, just remove the old one. It's garbage. Like when the car first came out, people, like the manufacturer's like, oh yeah, we added a dedicated oil cooler. But if you actually drive the car on that thing, it's not going to do that much better than the old gen. So
yeah, it's the same one that came, I think, OEM with like the Forester or something. So it's actually beneficial to getting your oil temp up to temp and then also slightly cool it when you're going too hot. But for track, it's definitely not appropriate. So when I was doing research on the first gen, because I was considering adding that one versus a dedicated air to oil, I went with the air to oil. I went with the Jackson Racing one, and that one's held up well on the first gen.
yeah. Yep. Okay, maybe last topic here. I know we're getting pretty close to time. So, all three of us are car reviewers with vastly different channel sizes. I think Kevin, you're almost at 1,000 after just a few months. I'm at just below 30,000 after a long time, like 7 years or so. And then Chris, what are you at? Like 400K, 500K now?
430-ish. That
430,000.
thereabouts. Yeah.
Yeah. So
crazy. I don't know why so many people watch my videos.
dude, they're awesome.
I don't get it.
Dude, your videos were what inspired me to start my POV channel. This is you and Tedward. I was like, you know what? These guys are onto something. So
also it's soothing, just like the consistency of like the uploads and the fact that it's always just from a POV perspective. Like I just throw it on while I'm doing other stuff and I'm just like, oh yeah, like that's an interesting comment about this car that I never thought about before. So anyways,
POV really came into its element like the last couple of years. So
and it gives you that sense of speed that you wouldn't necessarily have with like having the camera set up inside the car. So last comment here or topic here, given the wide variety of cars that we've all driven here, how would you rank the BRZ or Gr86 in stock form against specific other cars that you've driven, and especially within its price range and its intended purpose? How would you compare them to things like the Miata or even the old S2000 or just in the overall pantheon of cars that you guys have experienced? How does the BRZ and Gr86 stack up? And Kevin, I'll let you go first.
I feel like I have the least experience out of all three of us. I will say that for the price, I think that Toyota and Subaru knocked it out of the park. Like every time I get in that car, I'm amazed that how is this thing $28,000? It's such a fun car to drive. It is like the fit and finish and the polish now. Because in the first generation, you were like, okay, they clearly skimped on the interior. They saved money here and there to focus on driving dynamics. And in the second generation, I don't feel that way at all. I feel like the interior is much better quality. It's super comfortable. I got this wireless. Well, I had to add the wireless dongle, but I got CarPlay. It's such an impressive car for 28 grand. I'm still blown away that it's at that price. I haven't driven an ND Miata in a couple of years, so can't really comment too much on that. And then S2000, I mean, it's such a different era. So when you want that rawness, that screaming 9,000 or 8,000 RPM, depending on AP1, AP2, it's a very different feeling. And I made a comparison video of the first gen to the second gen back-to-back driving. And it's like a spectrum, right? So when you go back 20 years, cars are just more raw. And then you go 10 years ago or ish when the first gen came out, they were a little bit more refined, but still pretty raw. And then the current gen, which is like so much more refined than even the first gen. So it's kind of apples to oranges when you're comparing these cars that are separated by 20 plus years. As a daily driver, I think the Gr86, again, at the price point, knocks it out of the park.
Yeah.
Agree with all of Kevin's points. Yeah, you said it. I've always thought the BRZ, the Gr86, the FRS when it first came out, it's a brand new car that's 20 years old. You've got a modern head unit in there. That's it. That's one of my favorite things about it. When I was shopping for my next car, also BRZ is my only car right now. I sold my 4Runner, sold my Volvo to a buddy. It's actually still sitting in my garage, so I still could drive it quite a bit. But haven't said that anywhere else, so TOPher exclusive. But it's a one car solution for the enthusiast that works. And Kevin, you've made that work for longer than any of us have. And it does everything really well. It satisfies you enough. It's track capable enough. It's practical enough. And it has a few compromises, and we can make some concessions to have it as an only car solution. I shopped so many other cars because I thought I was kind of done with the BRZ and I had kind of moved on. I felt like it wasn't quite the right car for me at the right time anymore. But after looking at Camaros, Teslas, everything that I was looking at was 2 times or more expensive than the BRZ. I decided that this was still just the move and the way to go. And I'm really glad I did. I'm loving my ownership experience with the car so far. It's great to be back in a familiar platform. It's nice that they didn't change a ton of things between this and the previous gen. I think a lot of owners will be able to just hop right back in, appreciate the added refinement, the added little extra power, and go back and do the exact same mods they did to their old cars, maybe even swap some parts over. And that's really cool because I'm already familiar with the car. I don't have to go learn a whole new platform. And that's been really nice.
Was there any other car that was close that you were like, I'm between BRZ and X?
Camaro SS1LE. But you know what the problem was? Tire availability. Can't get winter tires on that car because of all the shortages and issues. And I needed something I could drive in the winter. And I know that I can go out and get a set of 205 60 R16s very easily at any discount tire, any tire rack point in time. And winter tires for high performance cars were really slim. And I needed
if you lived on the West
around.
Coast or in a place that didn't snow.
I'd be very tempted to get a Camaro SS1LE before they're discontinued here next year.
Yeah,
I might order one. We'll see.
Yeah, I've driven an SS1LE just for a brief stint, like 20 minutes. It's such a good car. It's so capable. It does kind of feel like the same ethos was applied to that car as was applied to the BRZ and Gr86, but it just got like double of everything, right? Like double the power. You know, it's a little bit heavier, probably like 1,000 pounds heavier, but it's still got a pretty delicate feel to it. Somehow Chevy was able to make it feel relatively nimble and playful, even though it's quite a big tank of a car. So completely agree with that.
I want to talk about Miata real quick.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time in the stock ND, the ND1, the ND2. My mom has an ND1 BBS Brembo package, 6-speed manual, driven that a bunch, love it. The stock Miata has always just felt a little bit numb though, a little bit distant, doesn't make a good noise. The day before I bought my BRZ, took delivery, I drove a friend's modified ND2. It had exhaust, it had sway bars, upgraded brakes, sticker set of tires, all the usual mods that we would all do. And it was perfect. It was awesome. I'm like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. I went online, looked up Miata prices. They were all 35, 36 grand. And I'm like, I'm getting to this BRZ for 28 and it can do everything that I need it to. It can be my only car. So, you know, the BRZ, it's not perfect. There's still some drivability issues that I have with it. It's not the smoothest clutch engagement. It's not the best tune with the engine. You know, I ran my previous gen BRZ on a OFT 91 octane tune for most of my ownership, and it felt a lot better than the stock tune. They've done a better job, but there's throttle response, you know, complaints that I have with the new car. It's not perfect, but it's fun enough. It scratches the itch, and that's important.
Yeah, the clutch engagement and throttle mapping on second gen is definitely worse compared to first gen. Although with first gen I do have Ecutech tune, but I didn't have issues with the clutch or the throttle on the first gen even before I got the tune done. So
yeah, I actually think that like the tune was the biggest problem I had when I first got my BRZ. Is just, I don't know if it's so much the clutch, it was more the response of the engine when you first sort of like from a stop and try to slip it into first gear. There's just a weird rev hang. It's like kind of inconsistent, and then when you're upshifting at lower RPMs, like first to second, second to third, there's a lot of rev hang, but it's not very consistent. Like I've been able to shift it in certain ways where I don't know what I'm doing differently, but then like the rev hang will disappear. Like I've tried to demonstrate it to passengers before, and then it just won't happen. But then I'm just like driving by myself and it's just like there.
There's this inconsistency with it, right? Because like even with like with the first gen, part of it is that I've had the car for so long, but starting from a stop, it's like cool, I can be very consistent and hit the same amount of slip every time. Whereas with the new car, sometimes I like kind of lug it. I'm like, oh crap, that wasn't enough. And the next time it's like, I don't need to go up to 2,000. Maybe that'll get better with time, but I just find like I need to focus on it a little bit more than I would like to get the consistent start every single time.
Yeah, exactly. I'm hoping, you know, a tune comes out soon. I heard the ECU recently got cracked, so I think the tunes are just right around the corner. That was my main complaint with the car when I first got it. I've gotten used to it in the 9,000 miles I've had it. So like to you prospective buyers out there, I don't think it's a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. It's just one of those things you'll have to get used to. And
You
then
get into a
Chris,
rhythm with the car, and
you do.
you kind of figure it out.
By the way, on track, it's not a problem at all. Like at higher RPMs, I have no rev hang. Like it just feels very, very natural. Going back to the one thing that you said, Chris, that really resonated with me is like you described the car as a brand new car that's 20 years old. And that's so true in my opinion, because it kind of gives you that like late 90s, early 2000s JDM sports car vibe, but you get all the modern tech with it. So it's like, honestly, it's not, I wouldn't say it's best of both worlds, but it's like 80% of both worlds. You get a good amount of that old school feel, minus certain things like the steering, the engine sound isn't that great. Like you don't get a cable throttle, you don't get hydraulic steering and whatever. And then with a tech, like, yes, you get Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, but then again, it's not wireless. And then like the sound system is absolute garbage. And one of the things that I'll probably be upgrading at some point if I keep the car.
The NVH is also a huge upgrade for a daily.
Yes, NVH is so much better. Like I recently shot a video where I was talking about yet again how the S2000 stacks up against the BRZ and Gr86, and I was recording that video while just putting around at like 25 miles an hour in the S2000. And then I went back and started editing the video and I was like, oh my God, the NVH is awful in this car. And even when I was driving it, I was like, this is just too much. Like, I don't know, because I daily drove an S2000 for a while back in my 20s, and like I could not.
We're in our 30s now.
We're in our 30s now, boys. Like,
tell me you're in your 30s without telling me you're in the 30s.
Right? Like,
the NVH of S2000.
My tolerance level for that kind of crap is just so much lower. And BRZ, it is much better than the old gen or the S2000 or a lot of other cars, but it is just good enough for me as a daily. Like if it were any louder, I think I would have some issues with it. But that's just me.
I think it's very good because like the first gen, so on my Apple Watch, I can look at the SPL, the sound level. I'm not sure how accurate it is, but highway on the first gen was like high 70s, 78 to 80 decibels.
That's right.
New gen, like 72. And I'm like, this is so refined compared to the first
but
gen.
I wonder how much of that is because
great.
both of you guys have the Primacy tires. I had the Pilot Sport 4s. They're stiff and loud.
That's a good point. Also, in
there's
my
a
FRS,
big
it's
difference.
PS4Ss. That's a good point.
There's a big difference between the Pilot Sport 4s and the Primacies. I drove them back to back in one video, and the Michelin, the Pilot Sports are just, I hate that tire.
It's a garbage tire because not only is it stiff and loud, it like doesn't give you good grip on the track either. Like it's in no man's land. Like you would think it's like close to a PS4S, just one letter missing from its name, right? But it's like a totally different experience.
Interesting.
It's a good tire on Corvettes and in wide fitment applications, and every other car that I've driven it on under like a 305 I hate it. Even like the Lexus RCF Track Edition, it's super loud, and that's a pretty well insulated, luxurious, comfortable car. And the Pilot Sport 4s just ruin it. So just get a Continental or get a Bridgestone.
Yeah.
Easy solution, easy fix.
Yeah.
The going back to the wireless, you can get a dongle, and I got one on Amazon for like $100.
Yeah.
And you can even tuck it in the thing so it doesn't take any space in your glove box, or not glove box, the center console. And mine's been flawless with Apple CarPlay, and I've had no connection issues. I mean, granted, it's only like 900 miles, but no problem with it at all.
My friend recently installed one of those in his BRZ as well, and he was telling me like it works fine, but it takes like an extra 15 seconds or so every time you start the car up before it connects, and I just didn't want to deal with that.
The extra 10 to 15 seconds doesn't bother me. So
okay. I'm very particular.
What
about
did you
that
buy?
game.
What did you end up getting? What dongle did you get?
It was Amazon. Let me pull it up right now.
Yeah. Oh, in the meantime, other things I don't like about it, like during road trips, both of my elbows are so uncomfortable. I don't know about you guys. Like there's just no soft place I can put both my elbows.
I think
I rest my elbows on the bolsters.
I'm
fine. On the seat bolsters.
I rest my arms on the seat bolsters.
Like
Tyrannosaurus Rex.
I think so. Like I think depending on your height and your limb length, it's going to be more or less comfortable. So for me, I'm able to rest my arm. If my center console is closed, I'm on the cushion, and then on the door, I'm on the cushion. But I know Savage Geese were saying like elbow can hit the button on the center console. If you're
Yeah.
resting, that can be annoying. I haven't had that issue. I think it just depends on your limb length. So the one I got was the Car Link It 3.0 wireless CarPlay dongle. It's $118 on Amazon right now and then you can get a $38 coupon. So you get it for less than $100.
Not
Got it.
bad.
Carlin kit.
Car link it.
Carlin kit. Cool. Nice.
I'll look into
All right.
that.
Good reviews. Cool. Plug and play.
Sweet. I will put the link to that in the video description. No sponsorship here, by the way, guys. So any closing thoughts? I know, we spent quite a bit of time talking about this one particular car that's on everyone's mind right now. All I can say is I like all of the little nitpicks aside. I mean, granted, the engine issue is not a nitpick. That's actually a major problem. But even regardless of that, or including that into the equation, I'm just so thankful that this car is even being offered for sale. There's not a whole lot of cars out there that can do what it does at within its price range. Like obviously there's an ND2 Miata, but if you're really looking for, like, in my opinion, I would even go so far as to say a sub $40,000 car that's front engine, naturally aspirated, rear wheel drive, manual transmission, and livable on a daily basis. I would say there is no other car that offers what the BRZ and Gr86 can do, because the ND2 is just not practical enough for me. So I hope manufacturers keep, taking I guess what I'm trying to say is I hope manufacturers see the success of this platform and offer competing cars. I haven't heard of any plans to offer something similar. Like Honda's all front wheel drive. Hyundai's got some interesting stuff with their N line now, but it's still all front wheel drive. So I don't know, like the Nissan Z could be promising, but again, it's a 2-seater. So what do you guys think?
With the economy heading in the direction that it is, I don't see many companies taking on a lot of risk with enthusiast vehicles. Again, I'm super grateful that Toyota is offering this and Subaru. I mean, and they had to collaborate too. So when you look at other car companies getting into this space, you have to think from a business perspective. And if Toyota, one of the world's largest car companies, needed to collaborate with Subaru and then with BMW for the Supra to make the business case, then you have to ask yourself, like, how realistic is it for other car brands too? So I would love to see it. I'm not getting my hopes up, but hopefully I'm wrong.
Great points.
I will say, I don't know the exact time frame or the exact numbers, but Nissan gave a presentation on their new Z, and they said since like the pandemic, sports car sales have gone up 30%, which is a lot.
Wow.
And that might make a little bit better of a case for future development of sports cars. I mean, we're kind of in this like, we've been saying this for a long time. Oh, it's the last sports car of its kind. Manual transmission, internal combustion engine, naturally aspirated. But the BRZ Gr86 truly are in a class of their own, at least right now. And the ND Miata is an amazing car. It used to be a competitor. Add in the practicality factor of the twins, and it changes things up quite a bit. I drove a Civic Si this week, and I feel like that's more a natural competitor to the BRZ Gr86 than it ever has been, because they're about the same price. Again, Civic Si is just a sedan, so it's going to be hugely practical. But it is in a class of its own, and there's really isn't anything else that offers the same value per dollar and fun per dollar anywhere else, except for until you get into maybe the Challengers and Mustangs and Camaros. And again, those are very different cars. They're heavier. They have way higher consumable costs. Tire costs alone you can buy 4 BRZ tires for the price of 1 Camaro rear. It's ridiculous. So it's a really great car. Reason why we keep buying them.
So I got 2 points from that. Number one, for all the people who are watching, I think there is a certain freedom and liberation that comes with owning and beating on a cheaper car. So when I first got my Scion FRS, I was a broke med student and I baby the shit out of the car. Even when like my car wash, I do this mobile car wash. The guy comes over, he sees my FRS. He's like, "That thing's 9 years old." Like, what? Because it looks so good. It's like in such good condition. But I baby that car for like 6, 7 years, and occasionally I would autocross it and whatnot in the first several years. But I didn't really start tracking it until like the pandemic, till 2020, and because I felt comfortable at that point that, hey, if something happens on the racetrack, I'll be okay. So I think there is a certain level of liberation that comes with not having the car own you when it's cheap enough that, hey, if something happens, not a big deal. Consumables, not a big deal. And when you stretch yourself too thin because you're trying to like flex and just like come across as like a super successful guy, it's it's stressful having a car that stresses you out financially. It's just not worth it. Like the whole point is to enjoy your vehicle. And I think if more people did that, they'd probably be a lot happier with their cars. The other thing I wanted to ask both you guys, Topher, sports car sales up 30% since the pandemic. Why do you guys think that is?
I think we've got a little bit of a ticking clock in the back of every enthusiast's mind. It's like, how much longer can we enjoy this? You see deadlines put on ICE sales over in Europe. Who knows how long those will hold up or what will actually happen. States like California are really going heavily EV. Here in Michigan, we still got Hellcats flying around the streets all over the place. No one seems to care. Um, you know, it it is. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? We can't predict the future. And in the United States, I think the transition between internal combustion engine to electricity is going to take a lot longer. We'll see. I don't know. I think though that everyone is just trying to get their kicks in. The pandemic gave us a sense of
Life is short.
mortality, I guess, or life is short. Might as well enjoy it. I'm driving something fun sideways. And Kevin, the point you made on driving a cheap car and making that a more fun ownership experience is a big reason why I like the BRZ Gr86. I like to take good care of my cars. I like to, keep them clean and enjoy them, but also not caring as much about it opens up a level of freedom, and I think it makes you enjoy the car more as an owner. And if I were dailing $100,000 Porsche, definitely wouldn't feel the same way. I would be stressed constantly. I know when I get an expensive press car, it's in the garage. I only drive it when I have to. It just kind of stresses me out because I don't want to be responsible for that six-figure, vehicle, even though, it's the manufacturer's. It changes the ownership experience, changes the dynamic. So that's a really
When
good
you
point.
when you view a car as a tool to bring you enjoyment, it's totally different than like viewing a car as this thing you need to take care of, and oh, I gotta get PPF everywhere, and I gotta do this and that, and like for the first gen, I PPF'd it, and then the second gen, I'm like, like this car, I don't know how long I'm gonna have it, maybe a couple years, and this is just a tool to bring me smiles. So I'm not gonna be as concerned about making sure it's in pristine, perfect condition. There's this analogy which I don't think is very good, but I think it kind of gets at the point. It's kind of a silly analogy, but I've seen it on Reddit a few times where guys are like, "Oh, babying your car is like saving your girlfriend for the next guy." Like it's kind of
Yeah,
cringe,
yeah,
but like it gets at that point.
yeah. So on that topic, I will be the first to admit that my car experiences over the past 3 years are probably the perfect example of what you should not do. So I like before my BRZ, I owned a 997 Carrera 911. And before that I had a Cayman, but specifically with the 911, I bought that car, for various different reasons. I got a great deal on it, for example, but a lot of it was like, hey, oh, like I own this, brand new, at the time it was $80,000+ flagship Porsche. And like there was a little bit of that, like that played into my decision to test the waters and actually own something that I knew financially probably was not a great idea. Not only because it's an expensive car with high maintenance costs, but also because like I'm someone who likes to track my cars, right? And tracking a 17-year-old Porsche, like that's just never financially a wise decision. And it burned me. That car burned me. I spent a huge amount of money fixing it. Finally sold it when it was in tip-top condition. So I don't know why I did that, but barely got to enjoy it at that point. But all I can say is when I moved to the BRZ platform, I don't know, I just love the car so much because it finally gave me that feeling that I used to have when I first started tracking back in like 2014, 2015 with my original S2000. But at the same time, I could use it every day. And so from an overall one car solution perspective, like Chris, to your point previously, it's in considering its price range, I think it's a no-brainer, even with all the potential issues that it could have.
Well said. Even if I do get, like, I want to get a Lotus Emira, and that car, like, it's going to be, 90 grand or whatever, and I'm going to maybe track it once or twice, and like I'm going to be afraid of anything happening to it. So I think no matter what, I'll always have at least one cheap like maybe not beater, but like a car that I don't have to worry so much about.
Yeah,
And
the
that,
Emira is to you as the NSX is to me. Like I tracked it once and I was scared shitless, and I'm probably never going to do that again. So, all right. Well, thank you both for joining me for this hour and a half long deep dive, I guess you could call it, into the BRZ Gr86 platform. Wish you both luck with your cars in the future, especially Kevin, as you start tracking yours. And yeah, I'm hoping, in a few months time or at some point when we've all had more experience with our cars and log more miles, more track days, more road trips, we can come back together and just give the viewers an update on our experiences. But
thanks for having us. Really been a pleasure.
Thank you both. All right.
Yeah. Thanks. This has been great.
Likewise. All right. Take it easy, guys.